Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace to people of good will. So, a few days ago, last Monday, the Kang Cadmus account put out a video titled, I'm a former white black Hebrew Israelite cult leader. And so I wanted to show a few short clips from that video and ever so briefly discuss what wasn't said and why this particular gentleman in the video has relevance to One West history. So with that, let's jump right in with a bit of an intro clip, which will run for a little over 30 seconds and fair use.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ron. Bro, I got like one of the best videos ever. I hope it doesn't get me in trouble, because there is no ill intentions with this video. People just keep asking me questions. So everybody likes a good story. So I'll give you a good story. I am a former white black Hebrew Israelite cult leader. Yes. Now I was with Great Millstone here in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, so that's how the video started, and the bulk of the rest of his video was him discussing his beliefs, which are apparently quasi-Marcionite at this point. But putting his current beliefs aside for a moment, as I noted at the start, in this video, I want to discuss his relevance to One West history. And this is worth documenting, as it seems that, with all due respect, within the Israelite spectrum, there is very little interest in the history of that spectrum. And so seemingly most of the folks who are within that spectrum are barely familiar with what was going on just a decade prior, or even a few years prior. For example, I've encountered more than a few Israelites who never heard of Tazadakia, right? They'll literally say, well, who's that? I never heard of him. You know, a man who was once one of the most well-known or even most infamous figures in the Israelite spectrum is now a complete unknown to many people today because, I mean, honestly, many are only focused on the current moment, you know, in conjunction with their private interpretations or the private interpretations of their particular group, right? But let's talk about the significance of the man on your screen, Aaron, or as he humorously said, Aaron, also known as Kang Cadmus, or as he used to call himself, Rex Scientia, right? He's the former leader of GMS's Columbus, Ohio camp. And here's one way that he's relevant to One West history, which wasn't touched on in his video. He's arguably the Israelite who inspired Vocab Malone to start focusing on the Israelite spectrum. You see, back around 2011, this man was going to churches and picking arguments with pastors, and Vocab caught wind of that because it was happening in and around the city that he was from. You see, from Vocab's perhaps earliest impression of the Israelite spectrum and his earliest impression of the situation, he saw an issue that was not being addressed by Christian apologists, right? Basically, a new religious movement which was going out of its way to pick arguments with Christianity. And so Vocab decided that he would start looking at Hebrew Israelites. So for all you Israelites who dislike Vocab and his work and how much attention he pays to the Israelite spectrum, the man on your screen, whom you might be unfamiliar with, played a significant role in Vocab turning his attention to the Israelites. That aside, on a perhaps less significant note, it could be argued that this man was also a sort of catalyst for GMS's hate campaign against Zabach. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm not saying that it's Aaron's fault, right? I'm not blaming him for that campaign. On the contrary, Tahar had long been picking arguments, very acrimonious arguments, with other Israelites as part of like an attempt to distinguish GMS from all the other groups. So it was, you know, just a matter of time before he got around to Zabach. But it could still be said that one of Aaron's videos was the spark that happened to set that inevitability off, you know? So I'd like to take a moment to tell that story, you know, to submit it into the record, lest, you know, it be forgotten, lost to history. You see, this gentleman had a video in which he was arrested by the police while holding camp, right? You see, the cops took issue with the language that he was using while he was holding camp, and when he was in the midst of saying, basically he said, you know, we have freedom of speech, so I can say F the police, you know, and he didn't just say the letter F, he said the full word, and you know, while he was like right in the midst of saying that, you know, F the police, the cop grabbed him by the throat and, you know, mid-sentence and arrested him on camera, and he uploaded the video. And Zabach left a comment on that video declaring, quote, "That's what happens when Edomites put on the garments," end quote. And a number of GMS accounts were clearly infuriated by that and, started responding furiously and calling Zabach a Hamite and cursing at him and all sorts of things like that. And honestly, some of those accounts may have been run by the GMS leadership. And whatever the case, from then onwards, GMS had like a years-long campaign against Zabach, accusing him of all sorts of things. And humorously, Johanna, the leader of ISUPK, actually commented indirectly on that fiasco. He did so without mentioning specifically Zabach, but nonetheless, in a video from around that time, like 2011, 2012, Johanna made a passing reference to the white leader of the GMS camp in Ohio. And he said, I remember him saying, let me tell you something, man. Tahar loves that white boy. And then he repeated it with like more emphasis. He said, Tahar loves that white boy, right? And at the time, it seemed clear that Johanna was alluding to how you can set Tahar off by daring to speak ill of his quote unquote white disciple in Ohio. And he was saying that, tacitly against the backdrop of GMS going after Zabach for doing precisely that. And roughly a decade later, Alazar Banloya, the leader of Sakari, recounted how when he was with GMS, that campaign against Zabach had a significant influence on him and on his thinking. Here, consider this quick clip.
Right? And that's some of the errors that the elder and apostles of Great Millstone led the men up under him to do, is going out of their way to justify hatred towards brothers, right? You taught me hatred towards people that I never knew, right? You taught me hatred towards people that I had never knew on false accusations that y'all forwarded against them. That's a real thing, right? That is a very real thing. They called Zabach they told us Zabach is an adulterer, right? Said all forms of evil about Zabach. But they told me that this nigga is a wicked, evil adulterer, right? And to hate his guts before I ever met the man. So much to the point where I'm in the same room as him and I avoid meeting him, and he goes out of his way to make sure he meets and greets me and breaks that spirit off of me, which I'm talking about, priest Zabach from House of Israel, right? You taught people to hate people, right?
All right, so I wanted to show that just to say that while, yes, GMS was going after practically every Israelite group, so they were bound to go after Zabach one way or another, and yes, they had a number of different accusations against Zabach, but, it still seems that it could be argued that the spark that set off the powder keg was Zabach daring to call the leader of GMS's Columbus camp an Edomite, right? But whatever the case, I could end this video here, as that basically sums up at least most of the thoughts that I have on his relevance to One West history. Now, perhaps there's more that could be said, like, he was arguably an early test case in GMS's idea of there being quote-unquote white Israelites and, the whole confusion of faces things. And he might be the most significant example of GMS's quote-unquote white members, right? And I do wonder if the GMS leadership still considers this man an Israelite, or, if they'll introduce an update to their purported reading of his spirit, right? That's also a theme with GMS. However, before I close this video, it seems to me that it's worth noting that in the same video, he made clear that he has become skeptical of all religion. And I'd like to play a quick clip touching on that. So here we go. And again, fair use.
Like I said, bro, like the Israelites, I think overall, they're a positive force in the universe. Most with any religious people, even most religions are wacky. Like, I don't trust no religious people no more, bro. I've lost all trust because it always ends up getting wacky. All right, so never join a church, never join any religious organization ever in your life. Don't do it. Okay, just walk your own path, brothers. Trust me, shit gets weird. I could do without the weirdo and wacky shit in my life. I really could. But I really do. I love the Lord. I'm trying to get in tune with the spirit, like Obi-Wan Kenobi. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying?
All right, so I wanted to show that to say that there are other former One Westers who moved away from religion in general. Now, some former One Westers go Christian. I can think of a couple who went Muslim. But there are also those who come out of the One West spectrum deeply skeptical of religion in general. And that's for different reasons. Some become skeptical of religion because the way their particular group might have treated religion as a hustle made it feel as though perhaps all of religion is just one big hustle. Others feel that the ugliness that they saw in their former group is a nearly inevitable byproduct of religion in general. And, Aaron sort of alluded to that. He felt that the ugliness that was in, GMS rhetoric was just a natural outgrowth of the Old Testament. I think he would probably enjoy like the writings of Gore Vidal. Gore Vidal had an article titled "Monotheism and Its Discontents" or something like that. I felt there was a similar theme there. But that said, when I was listening to this, I had the thought that I'd honestly be interested in seeing a dialogue between Aaron and other former One Westers who have become deeply skeptical of religion. Like, for example, a dialogue between Aaron and San Miguel. Maybe San Miguel could interview him. That might be interesting. I don't know. Or maybe even a discussion with the guys from Rebel Alliance Media, KOC and the Marksman. I don't know exactly what they're up to these days, but that would be an interesting roundtable, at least in my thoughts, right? To get this sort of new perspective. I don't know. But with that, I'll close this video here, and I want to close it with a clip of Aaron touching on how, despite the confidence he feigned while leading a GMS camp, he actually harbored doubts for years. So here, enjoy the clip, fair use, and, please feel free to share your thoughts. And as always, God bless.
I got a lot more to say, but this is just like a little fun video. Like I said, I'm a former white, black, Hebrew, Israelite cult leader, yeah. Like, what I did was such a great accomplishment, and I'm really proud of it. I'm so proud of my achievements in my past. I actually miss teaching with them. I really do, but I just, honesty comes first. And I'm honest with myself and honest with the data and everything going on. So honesty comes first, and truth comes before my feelings and friends and everything. I could have kept lying for a little while longer. Yeah, I was kind of like, I was teaching for many years with doubts in my head, but I didn't want to abandon everybody because they're my friends. All right, so I've been a secret Gnostic for not a Gnostic, but whatever, for years and years.